Hello, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's event. I help hosted through via FRAC, the Fairbanks Remote Alumni Chapter, or as some of us like to call it, the Free Range Alumni Community. We're grateful to host a Q&A for a candidate for Office of Grand President. So from the Northeast Province, we have Paul Carpinella. And just a little bit of an intro about Paul. He was initiated in the Untitled Chapter back in the fall of 1999. And since graduating to alumni status, he has had a multitude of roles as a volunteer leader within the fraternity, such as RVP, PVP, and being chairs within the National Professional Development Committee and the National Alumni Development Committee. So without further ado, Paul, floor is yours.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin, and thanks, Vito, for moderating tonight. And thanks, everyone who came here to join. I'm just going to do basically the format for today. We'll do kind of a quick presentation, kind of as quick as I could be. And then we'll open up the floor for questions. So Kevin and Vito will moderate. Interesting part of this is we're literally coming from 3 different sides of Boston. So, welcome to the hub of the universe, as we like to explain it. So as you think about it, we're really in an interesting opportunity and interesting time for Delta Sigma Pi. We made it through COVID in fairly good shape. From a financial perspective, we really didn't suffer losses or significant losses that certainly couldn't be covered or managed. Our chapter is both from alumni and collegiate perspective, and certainly FRAC is an example of that, showed us how we could push the buttons and really leverage technology to bring us closer together in a period when really we've never been further apart. And really there's a great deal and a great feeling of accomplishment here, knowing that we did it, and there's a great deal of pride to be a Delta Sig. But certainly we are having some challenges, going to be entering some challenges. We're going to be onboarding a new district director, and our volunteer leadership team is going to be new to their positions, including a board, which will be about 75% new. We're going to adapt to an extremely new normal and extremely, pivoting still, I think, in the fall semester, where not only are we having chapters that will be working together side by side for the first time in many cases, but also a ton of new officers who weren't really given the benefit of our physical lead programming, which has served as a great way to develop and nurture these officers from an educational standpoint and help them find mentors that bring them along the way. But certainly with those challenges come a great deal of opportunity, and it's something I think is exciting to kind of pull together those strengths and those challenges to really transform a 110-year-old organization to be further, exemplify ourselves as best in class in the professional business fraternity. And I'm running because I really think that my background, both from a Delta Sigma Pi professional leader, as well as a marketing professional, is the background that we need and the skill set that we need to really lead us to this new era of success. So Kevin went over my background a bit from a fraternal perspective, but I did want to also kind of give you a bit of a background from my professional standpoint. I've spent my entire 19-year career in the field of marketing, and it's predominantly been for tech startup companies. And over the past 6 years, it's been in the e-commerce space. So really working what was hand in hand with companies like Unilever, Procter & Gamble, and the most innovative companies in the world to figure out how to do this e-commerce thing, how to scale it from a local market to markets overseas. And then most importantly, how to build out communities, both of potential customers for our companies, as well as our current customers, to really keep them engaged. Also responsible to build out our technology stacks, manage global projects and global teams, and be the liaison between our sales teams, our marketing teams, our executive teams, and our board of directors to help really set sales and marketing goals, track how we're doing versus those goals, and provide some optimization recommendations for that. So it's really through those lenses, the lenses of a volunteer leader who really has an understanding of what is needed to be successful at every level of the leadership journey, from collegiate to board of directors to national committee chairs, as well as the challenges that they're going to be facing. as well as a marketing professional who has prided itself and recognized for building communities, for building cohesive teams and cohesive projects, and being innovative and always utilizing the best practices. As well as a brother who over the past 19 years, and specifically over this campaign season, this past 5-6 months, has spoken with many brothers to really understand what are their struggles they're going with today, what are the ways they want to help this fraternity, and what do we need to do and give them to succeed. So it's really through those lenses and through that experience, I've come up with a roadmap that focuses on 3 pillars: modernization, communication, and the combination of the two, which is really a reshaping of the Delta Sigma Pi experience so that we're more inclusive, so everyone is getting those benefits quicker. And most importantly, you're really living the benefits that we're promising each and one of us during our recruiting season. So let's dive a bit into the modernization piece. And really my vision around the modernization is really to utilize the best practices to make sure that we are working in tip-top shape as a well-oiled, efficient team that is well connected. And that really starts out with a good technology footprint. And my goal here is, one thing I've realized as National Alumni Development Chair in the conversations I've had and the events we've run from that committee, is that we have a number of alumni out there who are extremely expert in their areas, especially in the areas of IT and leveraging technology and data to get the most results. So really, we're going to bring that expertise into a task force, made up of alumni who've bought technology, who've implemented technology, who've sold technology. Also match it up with end users of technology, such as marketing automation systems and customer relationship systems and social media platforms. And bring in our staff as well as our volunteer leaders and our collegians, who would be the end users of potential technologies, to create a pretty comprehensive approach to a roadmap. One that gives the board multiple options, which would be, here's the Cadillac roadmap. Here's a roadmap you could afford if you go a bit above budget. And here's really the minimum viable technology stack that we need to thrive as an organization. So that way we could start off really making the right business decisions, but also have the confidence to know that we ask the right business questions up front, that we have the right business questions that we need to ask when we're going out to these vendors. And even if we're thinking about building some of these capabilities in-house, that we really know without a doubt what we need. And we're really going to be following that process through the other core operational areas. Really looking at bringing in our marketing experts to make sure that the way that we're marketing to each other and communicating to each other is segmented and it's appropriate for your stage in your Delta Sigma Pi journey. We're going to leverage the expertise, just as I think the DEI task force is doing a great job of now, of those experts in the diversity, equity, and inclusion field, to provide us and our chapter officers with the resources they need to help manage diversity and equity and inclusion programs within their chapters, but also to make sure that we have recruiting playbooks and frameworks that ensure that our national leadership team is as diverse as the brotherhood that we're serving. Really, my goal here is to, in all these processes, have as many different types of brothers involved in these changes and making these different change decisions and recommendations. So that way we're truly creating a Delta Sigma Pi way that is built and bought in from staff, alumni, all the way down to collegiate levels. So that's the modernization piece. The communication piece is one of those things I like to call keep working while we start kind of building out the back end core capabilities. And it really is centered around communication, transparency, and accountability and empowerment. The big pieces here is really to simplify the way that we're making goals or working on goals, and really to include our chapters in the goal planning process. My end vision here is, as we get this up and running, is that on a semesterly basis, the board and chapters will be talking to each other. What are the specific outcomes and specific things that we want to work on as a national team to help us not only kind of keep the lights on, so to speak, in the short term, but also position us to hit those strategic priorities 5 years down the road. And we're also going to be able to do things and keep the communication lines open by, really bringing the chapters into the discussions and the decision-making process that we're doing as a board. Do this by sharing summaries of the board agendas, as well as the recommendations and the questions that the board will be asking ourselves, along with a discussion document and a way for individuals to provide their answers. This will be shared with our district directors, our regional vice presidents, and our chapter officers, and encouraged to have those information shared and discussed at the chapter meetings. So this way, not only will there be an understanding of what the board will be discussing, it also forces us as a board certainly to be prepared a bit earlier. But more importantly, we're also able to understand, or at least get perspectives of what potential changes might mean as we're discussing the nuts and bolts of things. And what are some things that we haven't thought about that might make things better? And certainly, we're also able to keep that transparency going by continuing the process of streaming the board meetings. And by having these frequent two-way town halls, which would be sessions much like this, hopefully with less talking by me, where we're able to share, what are the big initiatives that we worked on? What are some big things that are coming down the pipe? And what are the questions that you have for us as a board of directors and that we have for you as general members in our chapters? This is really all centered around joint accountability to truly work. And really, we're going to start the process at the beginning of the year of following that simple accountability discussion framework that Tim Augustine and Adam Carroll had shared with us during the volunteer leadership retreat this summer. Really simple 3 to 5 question conversation that focuses on what are your expectations of me? What are my expectations of you? And how are we going to work together to get the best out of each other? So these are conversations that we're going to have board to board, board to staff, board down the RVPs, board down to the chapter level and district directors, and then flow that back up. And this is also something we review semester upon semester through obviously having these conversations at the town halls, but also by having things such as Brotherhood Promoter Score surveys. We're able to proactively identify any problems and also kind of get the pulse of the chapters. And the other piece here is certainly helping to better connect our officers with one another and with our staff and our volunteer leaders. The first part there is really bringing to a central location all these Slack channels, these Facebook groups, these group me's, these Discords, these text chains that the various officers are using into one centralized area, whether that's an enterprise level Slack or Discord subscription, or potentially beefing out the hub. But I've seen this work in the professional world, and it's really served as a great way for companies to understand what are the frequently asked questions, and then what are the resources and training that our officers will need in order to do their job well. And most importantly, we're not losing that information semester upon semester. And the other piece here is I really believe in strong committees. I truly believe I'm standing here today because as a collegian, our vice president of professional development empowered every member of that professional development committee, of which I was one, to have a say in the programming and to own something. So I think that is a scalable process that we can implement here on the national level. First part of doing that certainly is by having strong committee chairs, but also testing out a system where there is more control, or at least a bit more direction from our national chairs into what things are happening from the regional committee perspective. And staffing those regional committees with the respective vice presidents at the collegiate and alumni chapter level. In addition, and my hope is also to have a board of directors serve not only as an active member of our national committees or an active liaison, but also serve as big brothers to each of the officer positions. So that way, each officer not only has somewhat of a big brother type relationship, but then there's also a single point of contact that these officers might have. And it also serves as a central kind of rallying point to help solidify kind of that relationship between the officers from a national perspective. And then really in the reshapement process, my true belief is we're more connected as we're talking to each other better. We're able to improve our education and our content by really offering educational types. So really be receptive and of interest to each of our different brotherhood types. So for folks who are looking to start their careers, it'd be educational tracks for that. There'll be really robust training for each of our officer levels, as well as some adulting 101 classes and things like that. And the goal here is really, one thing, again, I've noticed as the National Alumni Development Chairs, and the FRAC is definitely an example of that as well, is there is an alumni network out there who is hungry, willing, and able to help us. So really, the more information that we have in terms of what type of capabilities, what type of education, and what things that our collegiate brothers need, the better we are to reach out to that network to ask for help. And I think this will also help us kind of deliver some of that education in different formats, and also potentially down the road create some more one-to-one mentor relationships, or even more of those resume reviews, or career panel type sessions. And certainly I think diversity, equity, and inclusion is obviously something that needs to be a major priority, and something I believe that we're working towards. The DEI task force and the roster that it has of alumni brothers who are professionals in the field is great, and it's a great start. And really I want to kind of scale that out and blow that out a bit more, so that way we're being very agile, but that committee is very well connected with the needs of the chapters as well. They'll be offering resources for our collegiate chapters, one from a president perspective to help them navigate those tough conversations, but also from a vice president professional development perspective, really helping them understand how to offer diversity, equity, and inclusion events that not only help educate individuals and the various groups within their chapters, or cultural backgrounds, gender backgrounds, religious backgrounds, sexual orientation backgrounds, but also provide some great value. And also really helping us understand how to build out our metrics and understand what are those right metrics and how to action those numbers. So that way, if we're falling behind, we know what are the specific steps that we need to take to make sure that it's diverse, but most importantly, that we're offering programming that really encourages diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that's a bit of spiel, but why me? Why now? Certainly, it's not hyperbole to say that the fall semester truly is our most critical semester in our history. And I mentioned before that my background is unique, because not only do I have a deep understanding from a fraternal perspective of a number of positions, both by serving in them as well as from working hand in hand with various brothers, but I also have a unique business background, because I predominantly work for small startup companies that would later be acquired. Not only did I have to learn and wear many hats within those small companies, but as we were transitioning into those larger organizations, I was exposed not only to the capabilities in those processes, but also understanding how to navigate during times of change, how to bring people together during those times of change, and most importantly, how to take those new learnings and really scale it out to make things better, campaign upon campaign, month upon month, year upon year. That experience has really helped me not only bring teams up to speed very quickly from a fraternal and professional experience, but it's also helped get buy-in of a strategic vision and get people really working towards the same things and feeling passionate about that. And the final part here is, I've been doing a number of these town halls throughout this campaign process, and I'm having a number of conversations. The main reason why I'm doing that is, one, obviously to introduce myself, but most importantly, to get feedback on my plans, to have people ask questions about it, to have people poke holes in it, and also to have people offer suggestions and better ways to look at things. I really believe that that's the key to success, and that's the type of culture and the type of leadership that we need to display, and the type of message that needs to be seen from the top down. So I appreciate the time. And speaking of feedback, it is time for the question and answer period. Certainly, I left the contact information in the chat, but these are kind of also some ways to get in contact with me. So now, from our 3 different sides of Boston, or actually, I think it's Vito's turn actually for the question and answer portion. And as Vito mentioned, you could enter those into the Q&A box or the chat box.
Yeah, it is. I guess it is up to me now.
So
I didn't make these questions. tell your audience we not see
you. Some of these may be tough. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you kind of spoke on this one, so I'll start it out easy. What are your plans for transparency, not just with the board, but you yourself as a grant president?
Yeah, so I think these are a lot of examples of it. My general feeling is, I truly believe our leadership team is our collegiate chapter officers all the way up to our board of directors. And my goal is to really operate in that vein. So that's why I'm really passionate about things such as those accountability discussions, sharing the board agendas, and also having those board meetings streamed. And I'm really passionate about getting people working together, because my true feeling is, I think a lot of the issues that we're seeing around transparency is the fact that we're just not involving people in the conversations, and people are just kind of in their own silos. So really the goal around, having those strong committees, having those town halls, having those, shared Reader's Digest versions of the agendas are really all ways not only to make sure that everyone knows what's going on, but also ways to get everyone working together. And I think there's going to be obviously some concrete, this is exactly what we're talking about, what we're looking at from those town halls and in those certainly board agendas and the streaming, but there's also some osmosis that'll be coming out of the committee structure and that big brother structure up to the board of directors. Because I've often found, like, the best way I've learned things and the best way that I feel informed is by working hand in hand with someone and also looking at information as it's coming out. So those are really kind of some of the ways that I see it. And some ways I've seen actually work well in some of the companies I've at, and specifically when the acquisition cases, they had monthly town halls, they had frequent email communication that really helped us feel, part of the family coming out, and that we were, an active part of the change that was coming.
Okay, yeah, that's a great answer. And kind of piggyback off of, you kind of touched on this one a little bit, but you kind of brought it back up just now. What will be your approach with national committees and the national chairs?
Yep, I'm biased. Obviously, I'm a big fan of committees, and I believe in their strength, having managed two of them or been chairs for two of them. But I really believe our secret weapon are going to be the national committees. I believe in them for a number of reasons. I told that story about my collegiate chapter days, but I've also noticed that from a perspective. So when we look at the national chairs, really what I want to do is have a national chair structure that are some, very familiar names, folks who have worked together and folks who really understand how Delta Sigma Pi works, but also have a deep understanding in the background of how to get the most out of each areas. A big part when we look at positions such as alumni development and professional development, great ideal state would be someone or individuals who have foundation experience, because I think certainly those are two positions where there need to be pretty lockstep relationships and knowledge of how to work with the foundation, and most importantly, how to have conversations around what are the right ways to engage alumni so the foundation gets their donors, and certainly we are able to develop future leaders. And it's the same really around the professional development case, because certainly I think as we start to go into, I think, professional development, I think it was 2 or 3.0 when I was chair, we're probably about like 10.0 at this point. There's probably going to need to be some spend in terms of tools and educational content. One off the bat is things like a predictive index, which kind of tell you what your leadership personality is and how you work best with others. So those are things that certainly you want to understand how to cost for, but how to have those budget conversations on the other end. And I think most importantly, the charge that I'm going to give any national chair is, your job is to develop 2 or 3 of the next chairs. Either right now we're going to take your job, but when your time is over, but they're going to be the chairs 5, 10, 15 years down the road, and they're going to develop that bench. And my approach to the national committees is really to be a mix of it, and how I've seen committees work well really is when there is that mix of a chair who is a bit of a really knowledgeable in Delta Sig policy, really knowledgeable, kind of to get through the minutia, coupled with a committee that's a mix. Some of the old names, some of those kind of second, third generation or first generation brothers. And I think adding the collegiate perspective, I think will be helpful. And then also, I think there's always been this bit of uncertainty of who do the provincial and regional chairs report to? Do they report into a national chair, or do they report into their local leadership? And really what I want to try out with by having strong committee chairs is a system where all that information, like there's a pretty clear line of who you're kind of accountable and reporting into, but it's more of who you're working together with and empowering those committees to make some real change, sort of like we're doing in the board of directors, right? Each province has its own representative that still kind of their first team is the board, but then they're also responsible to make sure that things are going well in their province. So we're really kind of following that. And I'm excited. I think the other kind of part of this year is when you talk about regional committees, it's also behooves us to create some templates for the RVPs to be able to make those work well, but also for the chairs to be able to empower those regional committees to work well as well. But again, that's all the situation where we're talking more to each other up and down, and everyone knows who to talk to, and I think we'll be in a great spot.
I guess a small follow-up question to that is, you talked about getting collegiates on there, getting old and new faces on there. Is your idea to expand how many members are on each committee? Because you already have the 5 that are selected by their PVPs. Right now, there's only like 2 to 3 at-large members. Is your plan to expand that to maybe a total of 5 or 7 at-large members that can be brought onto those national committees, with the 5 that are already owned by the provinces, for lack of better words?
Yeah, so I think, well, you both have probably noticed the alumni development's a bit, well, we're probably about 7 or 8. But yeah, so I think the goal is to expand it. It's also kind of to, my goal is really have some subcommittees within each of these committees. So then that way we can understand what are the true staffing needs that we have. And you both know I'm a big kind of hound on data as well. So also really understanding, really leveraging ways to get the most information on career backgrounds and expertise on alumni and our collegians as possible, to make sure, if we have a committee of 5 that are like all-stars and Hall of Famers in that area, that's probably good. But if we have a committee of 20 where that we know all 20 of those folks are best positioned to do the right thing, and there's enough work for 20 people, there's no reason why we can't look at that. But again, we're also looking at beefing up the provincial committees and regional committees. So there's going to be some space for these individuals in other spots as well.
Okay. This question is a particular committee question, I guess. What are your views on, I don't know, you tell me how this sounds to you. What are your views on eliminating the bias in the awards committee? Example, maybe having people from outside of said region or said province be on said awards committee. So I guess maybe what are your thoughts or feelings about trying to make things a little bit more fair, I guess?
Yeah, so I'm actually part of the Niagara regional awards committee. So obviously I'm a big fan of looking at some of the ways to remove the bias. And I think that's something we certainly have to look into. It could be a situation where maybe that's more of a national kind of committee that's reviewing all the applications versus a regional committee, and the regionals are more dealing on marketing, promotion, and focusing on scholarship. So I think it makes sense. I think it also kind of makes sense of what some of the plans of the chair might be in that. But I also think it was certainly for some awards like District Director of the Year, that's probably something where where there could be a potential bias on the RVP level, where it might make sense to make that, for example, more of a nominations type position or a nominated type award, and then kind of have some outside resources there.
Yeah, I'm like you. I'm on the Sierra Nevada Regional Committee, so I'm like you with trying to be on a different one.
Yeah, I love Niagara too.
Kind of pivoting off that one question is, there are many volunteer opportunities in Delta Sigma Pi, being a foundation donor, being on a committee, being on a DD, being a DD, etc.
Yep.
What else does the fraternity have to, in all capital letters, offer alumni? So I guess besides giving back, that's how I'm taking that question.
Yeah, that's $1 million question. I think we're all trying to answer, but I have some thoughts both as a chair, as a candidate, and then as kind of a general brother. So I agree. I think there are a lot of ways to give back, but a lot of the ways that we promote to give back and that we're kind of staffed to give back are things that tend to be time intensive. What I truly believe and what I've seen over the past year is I think alumni are kind of starting to fall into a couple of camps, and it's sort of generational here as well. So we have, I think, those alumni who might be, more, early senior level to maybe that high-end junior level, who really are available, who really want to be able to give back in some light ways. So they might be wanting to give back from a mentor perspective. from a resume view review perspective. So I think, hey, let's bring them in, let's create a structure that lets them do that. I also think there's probably some, some of those younger alumni out there, like, I could have used this, and I'm sure early in your career, Vito and Kevin, you probably could have benefited from this as well, in terms of, really just need those, one-on-one type skills. So how do I build my career? How do I think about my finances? Which I know we've had those type of sessions in the past, but, certainly creating, I think, some more robust educational tracks around there will help. My general feeling is, I think there's also kind of a group in the middle that just want to kind of know what's going on and be kept warm on the bench, so that when opportunities do come up, they're ready and able to go. And to me, I think that really not forces us, but I think requires us to have pretty active programming from alumni that's really diverse, and also working with our alumni and cohesion with our alumni chapters to make sure that we're doing that. For example, as we saw this year, there were tons of chapters doing virtual events. There were tons of alumni chapters doing virtual events. There are tons of collegiate chapters doing events, and it became overload. So if we're able to centralize that a bit, or at least communicate that a bit more, not only are we kind of able to create a national type of calendar, but we're also kind of able to see what are the common type of sessions and educational offerings that are up there, and really start showing alumni, here are some ways you could come back from an educational perspective, or speaking perspective, and things like that. So that's kind of I think it's probably a circular answer, but to me, the answer is usually you have to kind of keep doing things that speak to each of these different audiences. And then I think you also kind of have to change things up year on year, but still kind of falling on some oldies at work. And certainly if there's a follow-up or need more clarity, let me know on that one. Okay,
I'll keep an eye out on that one. Here's a fun one. What traits will make you the most successful as a GP?
I like to think it's my shining personality, but I'm not 100% sure on that one. I think obviously it's not the joke capability. So I think the biggest traits are, one, the listening. I've been able to be successful both as a Delta Sig leader and in my career, because I've known when to sit back and listen, and I've known when to kind of stand up and make a stand. So I think that's important, especially now where there's going to be a lot going on, and a lot of opinions that, want to be heard, but also a lot of uncertainty, if that makes sense, and questions on how to do our job well. So it'll behoove our next leader to be able to be, have that skill to listen, but also have the skill to take that information, synthesize it, and say, here's the answer for that, or, oh, here's how we should be looking at that, or here's some resources you need. So I think the listening, the synthesizing part is big. And I also think the approachability trait is something important. The Grant President, it's truly it's the most senior elected officer, obviously, on the board of directors, but, it's still a voting member of the board of directors. It's really also, the face of Delta Sigma Pi. And I like to think, that my approachability and my willingness to really want to talk to everyone, to really want to offer congratulations and be approachable will be important. Because I think there are times when the Grand President needs to step in and say, hey, that's a good job. Whether it's zooming into a chapter meeting, or other times when you're listening into these, or you're looking at the Rose Report and you're seeing a chapter come up time and time again, and you just send a note to that chapter president and say, hey, love to chat for a couple of minutes. I see you're struggling. What can I do to help? And, can I come talk to your meeting and at your meeting? And really even use that from a perspective of, as we get back to physical events, not necessarily being the person who's kind of, always standing in certain areas, but physically reaching out to the RVPs to say, who are the chapters that I should be talking to? Who are the ones that really deserve a pat on the back? Who are potential leaders out there? That I should be talking to, and who are just some of those that kind of need a plug. So I think it's that part, and I think the last part is really the thick skin and the trait to really want to receive feedback. It's not a campaign line. Like, you're both on the you both sat in on meetings that have run, and oftentimes it's me kind of coming up with, hey, what do you got? What does everyone think about this? having folks start poking holes in it, and then like, oh, okay, well, what if we tried it this way to come to the right answer? And I think truly being able to listen, to be approachable, and then most importantly, to also be willing to have people, poke holes to get to the right answers, I think are traits that are going to help me, be successful. I don't have to be the greatest Grand President, but I need to be the greatest Grand President for this period. And that's what I think we need.
That's a good transition for this next question. What do you see as the idea board of directors that will transition the fraternity?
Yeah, I love the slate of candidates that we have now. I think really that ideal board is one that really understands, how to trust the opinions of those who are knowledgeable, but also how to establish those relationships and connections with the officers. Ideally, I think the board of directors, I love the fact that there are a lot of folks who are running, who have communications and people backgrounds, because I think that's something, especially in a time of transition, that's utterly important. And I think certainly a board that's open to communicating, that's open and understands how to motivate people, but most importantly, how to identify strengths and put people in the right position, is exactly the type of board that we need. And then most importantly, a board that's willing to, yes, be the leaders of the organization, but also admit when they might not know things or they might be wrong. And they have those open and honest conversations to kind of go back. I'll admit all the time, if I'm wrong, I'll let you know. And I tell people all the time, if you think my idea is I say stupid, and they always say be nice, but if it's not, if it's a non-workable idea, let's know that now, as opposed to going down a rabbit hole or things like that. So I think that's what we need. But I think the biggest part is we just need one of the times that I think you see teams be really successful is when they're having fun. And I think really a board of directors who are getting us all working together, open to feedback, being human, and then also encouraging fun and really making it fun for everybody is going to be exactly what we need here. And I think we have a slate of candidates, luckily, up and down the tickets. They'll help us get there.
Okay. If you had the power to make one fraternity change without anyone else's approval and had the sole discretion, what change would you make and why?
Oof, that's a tough one. I think if I had one kind of sole change, it would literally be just kind of picking out the technology stack, like the Cadillac of all technology stacks. I'm a tech guy. I work in tech. So, but I truly believe like that is the answer to a lot of our questions. Because then, in the situations where we're finding it tough to really get good demographic data, really understanding, who are the right people to put in the right positions, you have the right technology stack, you're able to do that, and you're able to put into the right processes. So I really think that's the answer. And I think that because that's also going to be the key to communicating better, to bring in everything in centrally, but then more importantly, to also be able to get at information the right way to make us more effective. So I think those are certainly the big pieces. And to me, I think and I say that because obviously I'm in tech. I market analytic solutions, but really we're in the digital age and we can't be successful. We can't scale. We're not going anywhere if we don't have the right technology and not using it properly.
Okay. Any ideas for community service in this next biennium?
Yeah, so I think this still goes back into making things local and scaling that national. So I think one of the big pieces here is, again, kind of going back to the theme of getting all those community service chairs talking to each other, I think will be a big win. But I also want to challenge that community service committee to really look at what are those local regional chapters. For example, here in Boston, it's the Jimmy Fund. I'm sure as you look out in New York, it's probably, the Mount Sinai and things like that. So I think those are the big pieces. And then what I also want to do is also look from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective of what are those groups and organizations that we could volunteer with to help nurture and to help other folks, kind of come into line and be successful in life and in business careers. So I think those are a couple of the ways we'd be looking at the community service perspective.
Okay. As someone who will have a vote to confirm our next executive director because Bill Schilling is leaving us, what do you think the fraternity needs in this position going forward?
Yeah, and it's no light vote too, because it's really a 25-year hire if we get the right person. And I think we owe it to ourselves as a fraternity to have a pretty expansive search, which I think we will. But what I really think we need is someone who has a really kind of deep background, in the communication areas, really understanding how to not only market, but also kind of set us up for, really high level events that's, kind of segmented to different folks. I think ideally one of the things I kind of think about is, maybe looking at someone who might have experience, in the higher ed space and development and alumni relations might be a skill set in order to be able to understand how to work with collegians and how to engage alumni. I think are a couple of skills. And I think the other biggest skill here is someone who is skilled in the digital workforce. So, someone who definitely understands, how to leverage technology, how to kind of, use technology to its biggest part, and then certainly how to communicate well and really make sure we're all informed. So I think those are the biggest keys from perspective.
Okay. What are your plans to engage alumni that either A, don't live near a franchise alumni chapter,
yep,
or they do not live near a franchise alumni chapter, and they do not live near enough alumni to make a franchised alumni chapter, or there are just no collegiate chapters around? Examples: Mu Pi in Pennsylvania, or our brothers in Salt Lake who don't have a collegiate chapter near them, but Salt Lake City is booming right now with tech jobs.
It's interesting because Mu Pi is actually probably one of the more engaged alumni groups out there, but it's also, there's a thick cluster, I think, who are pretty engaged there. So I think there are a couple of things that, again, I think part of it is also understanding where are our clusters, and then really finding the champion. So for example, in Salt Lake City, there's probably going to end up being a cluster of brothers out there. So who are those champions, and really recruiting them to help us kind of start some alumni chapters. So I think those are finding the hidden gems. I think in other areas where, Fairbanks, Alaska, middle of Pennsylvania, Fort Kent, Maine, my favorite place, or somewhere in the middle of the world, I also think it requires us to have the communication vehicles up to make sure that they're knowing what events is coming on, but they're also not overloaded. But then also ways that they could give us information about themselves to be able to tell us how they want to interact with us. For example, if there's someone living in Fort Kent, Maine, or Fairbanks, that might be expertise in, marketing automation of those and is interested in mentoring people in those areas, then let's go, let's do it. If it might be someone who might be interested in mentoring startup founders who might live in one of these remote areas, then certainly let's go and get that. And I think there's probably certainly a case to be made. I think, we've had a couple of different approaches, whether it's a centralized alumni association or more interest groups. They'll certainly be able to engage those folks as well. So I think those are big things. Again, the big thing is just keeping the constant communication going and making sure they understand there are various ways to engage, and then finding potential champions. And as you get one or two people starting to engage, really starting to look out to where the other branches might lead there from a local perspective.
Yeah. And I just realized I asked that question slightly wrong when I said it actually says who live in Pennsylvania, where we have no alumni chapters, and brothers who do not live where there would be enough members to charter a alumni chapters because there's not 10 members within a certain mile radius. That's how that Pennsylvania question was supposed to be asked. So.
No, I was wondering where that came in. No, and you think about it, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh both used to have it. So I think it's also kind of understanding.
So it's like Mu Pi wouldn't have, I think it's now Mu Pi, they may have collegiates there, but like there's not enough alumni that would live there to make a chapter. Like
Exactly. No, okay. Exactly. And I think that's also probably where, a lot of other, Greek organizations have clubs where there's kind of loose affiliations. So that might be something. And then it's interesting, as we've been looking at this as from a National Alumni Development Committee perspective, really the question around vote for those who aren't, part of franchise alumni chapters. There are also some ways by kind of creating some caucuses or delegate type situations where you might be able to give some votes to, general alumni who actually aren't part of franchised alumni chapters or full-blown alumni chapters. So to give them some voice.
Okay. And if you are elected Grand President, what would you want your legacy to be?
Yeah, I think I want my legacy to be a deep leadership bench that kind of goes throughout. To me, I've always been kind of proud of being part of Nick Steinkrauss's leadership tree, and honestly, nothing would make me more happier to know that collegians who were, collegian during my Grand President term, and worked with this board of directors and worked with this national leadership team that developed their skills, are still active and still, leaders 15, 20, 30 years down the road and building their trees. That's a legacy I want to build, really the legacy of leadership building and, putting this fraternity in the standpoint where we're working so smoothly that we could develop leaders at the drop of a hat. And that we had fun doing it.
What do you see as what is the fraternity board decision you are proudest of from your time as a PVP?
Oh, that's a good question. It might have been my hardest decision, honestly, or kind of the hardest one I led. So, we were in a situation with one of the chapters, it was a single letter chapter that had a pretty long and storied history, but, it was down to a point where, they just, as much as we tried and as much as we wanted to, it just wasn't scalable. And I think I'm proud, not necessarily proud of the fact that we had to take away their charter, but I'm proud of the fact that, we did everything that we needed to do to get to a point where, the decision was the right decision to make, but that we're still able to give them the support they needed. So I think, unfortunately, it might not be one of the more funner decisions, but it's also a case where I think the lead up to it and everything that we did to kind of get to that showed how to work right. And how to try to solve problems and make the decisions we need to make it, which probably also makes me sound like a mean person. So sorry. So apologies on that one.
As someone who was just DD for a chapter who had to have their charter revoked, I totally love your answer because I got that sympathy. I got at least some sympathy for you there. Any more serious questions you want to ask Paul before I leave the two fun questions that we got submitted to end us on a smiley note? Go ahead and throw them in the chat or the Q&A box. One of them is the pizza question, though, Paul.
Oh, perfect. I have my hand. That's the first time I have a fun answer off the top of my head.
Well, I'll just ask it if anyone's gonna jump in on it. From one of our brothers out west wants to know: does pineapple belong on pizza? Yes,
it actually surprisingly absolutely does. And I also say this because one of my sons is a vegetarian, so that is his favorite pizza topping. So that one kind of, if it's unpopular, I'm sorry, you could blame 9-year-old Thomas Carpinella. But yes, it belongs. As do, which is what I was expecting, pickles. You'd be surprised, but holy cow, do they make a delicious pizza. When you try it, make sure you send me a message because it will change your life.
You got me rethinking my whole life. We need to, I think the three of us need to meet up and no, I'm not gonna do that. Paul, what is your oh, this came right from yesterday's FRAC call, actually. Paul, what's been one of your favorite FRAC events or some of your favorite FRAC events you've been able to attend?
Oh, interesting. I thought the Alumni Day call was really, this past Alumni Day toast was really cool. I think
this year or last year?
This one here, I think was a lot of fun because it's, you really look kind of what was built, but Vito and the rest of kind of the founders crew and Kevin here, like to seeing what was built and the love and the brotherhood was really cool. I've been the kind of similar type of dinners at Grand Chapter congresses and other events, and like the feeling of love and brotherhood was really cool. So I'd probably give that number one. Let's see, I think probably one of those where I was, there was another meeting and one of the first ones I joined, which I kind of found fun, was one where I was kind of falling asleep and just kind of dozing off. And they're like, are you watching TV there? I think it was also when you're talking about the FRAC bylaws and things like that. And I got scared, honestly. So you guys called me out, but I enjoyed that. And even kind of just being able to sit down during the Alumni Day Marathon, you know, I certainly enjoyed. Katie, who's usually the dancer, I enjoy seeing her dances when they're on there. And also, you know, Cody's dance, I think seeing that the other day also was pretty inspiring. I don't know if you'll necessarily ever see me doing a dance there, or you might, but it was fun to see that, to get some dance move inspirations for the next time I have to do the dance recital, the dad's dance during one of my son's dance recitals.
All right, well, brothers, I think
Doors open.
I think I can speak for all FRAC brothers, where you're always welcome at the tavern. You know how to get there.
Oh, definitely. Well, I have my my Cheers tavern sign up here, so I'll show it next if I show up, or next time I show up.
Okay. Well, Paul, I think that's all the questions for right now. Paul gave you guys his info, so if you ever want to contact him, ask him about his platform even more, express some ideas, I'm sure he's happy to entertain those thoughts. Yep. First thing he'll say, Paul's a pretty good guy and a pretty good brother. So if he wins the elections, we will, you know, like I say, we'll be in some decent hands. And see you guys on the next FRAC call. Probably going to be, what, this upcoming Friday? And
that's what it looks like.
Nice.
Yeah, same time, same place. You know where we'll be.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Vito and Kevin. I appreciate you you both setting this up, and you know, for FRAC for being so open to doing it. And honestly, thanks for the questions. Like these were awesome, and I appreciate it. And yeah, and thank you, Vito. You're making me cry a little bit, so I'll stop talking. But thanks a lot. And I also would like to thank everyone for being virtually in Boston here with the three folks and the three brothers online. So thanks a lot. Have a great night. And yeah, any questions, certainly feel free to find me. But thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Night.
Thank you, everybody. Take it easy.
You too.